Last Concordia, I'm taking the whole 13 minutes because my colleague is unavoidably absent. Now, I think there are a number of issues in relation to Pleanála. And long before anybody made any allegation of impropriety, I had been complaining about the total inefficiency and ineffectiveness of it as a board. And I have a belief that one of the first signs of a problem is when organisations become totally incompetent at doing what they're meant to be doing. When there's a pile-up of material there and nobody ever seems to be able to get a clear answer to anything. One of the problems is, of course, we're doing all the investigations now, post factum. And I hope this time we'll get it right and we'll make sure that there's a good and open and transparent system there. But Board Pleanála, for years back, has been an organisation that has let ordinary people down time and again. There's a statutory objective that they're meant to make decisions within 4 months. And I was looking at a list of queries where people were complaining, not making any representation about the decision, but were asking, when will a decision be made? A legitimate question. Now, as I said, the objective is, and when you put in your application, it pops up on the website 4 months from the date in which you put it in. I have cases. One case in Mulcullen, lodged on the 12th of the 3rd, 21. I don't care what the decision is as long as it's the right decision. But we're now in the 9th month of 2022. So that's a year and a half, and they can't make up their mind. I have the next one that was lodged on the 13th of the 8th, 21. Still no decision. The next one is fascinating because it's leave to apply for substitute consent. So they're only asking for leave to apply. They're not asking for substitute consent. The 5th of the 10th, 21, in other words, nearly a year to get a decision, can you apply for substitute consent, which is a kind of planning permission where there was issues of EIS and non-compliance. In that case, the person who was making the application had no connection with the people who are not in compliance with the quarry law, etc. Next case I'd like to highlight, because it seems extraordinary that it has taken from the 31st of the 12th, 21, that's the last day of the year, we're now in the 9th month, and the application is in relation to a previously granted permission to renovate and extend a derelict building in the countryside. A one-off derelict building. Now surely it doesn't take 9 months to decide that you can either renovate and extend or not renovate or extend a house that existed originally. Next one, 21st of the 1st, demolition and construction of a house, of a cottage, and the construction of a house. Again, 8 months. You'd think it wouldn't be that complex. Probably the worst case I have, and that's Concordia Connolly, I think, would agree with me on this. Galway City Council bought a house in a place called Kiltulla. And mysteriously, one night, the house got burnt down. And Galway City Council applied to get the house, to demolish and rebuild the house for the family that had been allocated the house by the City Council. There were any amount of objections, that I grant. But I'd have to say it seems to me that those objections were more as to who was getting the house although they're people of impeccable character, but they belong to a minority community. These people are waiting for a house. They're living in a caravan. The application went in the 4th month of this year. It's over time. One would have thought that if somebody's house burnt down and you wanted to rebuild the house to go and live in it, that would be a very simple planning decision. So when I add up all these cases and other cases, what I find is a totally ineffective decision. I don't know if any of you ever saw the film The Man for All Seasons. When he was coming out of the court one day, somebody tried to bribe him and said, "My daughter has a case in a certain court." And he gave a very quick answer in 2 parts. He said, "I give the same decision I'd give my daughter. A fair decision, quickly." And that part, or second part of it, is part of justice. In other words, justice delayed is justice denied. And it's symptomatic of a totally incompetent organisation when it cannot make decisions in good time, even on the simplest of things. And when you have a chaotic organisation, chaotic things happen. And I believe that An Bord Pleanála needs reform from top to bottom. Not another agency, because replacing agencies because they don't perform is just totally cardiology. The concept of an appeals board that's independent, fair and effective is a perfectly reasonable one. But it should be fair and effective. Now, we often, in looking at organisations, we get all sorts of experts in. But the one thing we never seem to do is get a process auditor in. Now, if any of you ever worked in an industry, they're focused every day on making sure nothing has to get done twice, that you get rid of all the logjams and all the delays, that you don't move a thing twice, that you can move once, and so on. And that you don't tie yourself up in knots, answering as to why you haven't got the thing done. Can you imagine all of the calls that An Bord Pleanála are getting about, I only mentioned a few cases, that all of the cases, imagine the waste of labour, the waste of staff that could actually be doing work if they were doing it properly, that's wasted in these organisations. We've got the same thing, if I might say, about visa applications. We've the same thing we had, well, that kind of disappeared. But in other words, queues take staff, time, money and resources. What we should do is eliminate the queues and do things in the time indicated. Now, if we did that, of course, we wouldn't need quite as much staff, because you wouldn't have people endlessly answering queries as to when a decision is going to be made again, again and again. And it is, in my view, absolutely vital that any organisation that's not delivering in time all the time, and maybe if this had happened in An Bord Pleanála 4 or 5 or 6 or even 8 years ago, or 10 years ago, when they started slipping behind their statutory targets. And if we had put in a process auditor, maybe some of the issues, which I don't want to comment on because they could wind up before the court, maybe they would have come to light if somebody had gone in there and looked right through the processes and said, is this a good process? Is this an efficient process? Is this one that delivers to the citizens of this country fair decisions, good decisions and in-time decisions? I have to say that the idea of allowing 2 people on their own make major planning decisions seems a recipe for disaster. I think most people would have thought that the big decision, particularly if a one-off house, is one thing. But again, we don't seem to have any gradated decision-making And we seem to treat, for example, the replacement of a house that got burnt down, but the family just want to go back and live in the house. We seem to treat that the same as a very big office block, apartment block, housing development or whatever. And we don't seem to have any proportionality in the system as to the checks and balances you put particularly on the larger decisions that affect a lot more people and are a lot more likely to be contentious. So what I would say is we need to follow the issues that have been raised right to the very end, and I'm glad it's been referred to various agencies, and I think they should be allowed to do their business through the processes that the state has set up to deal with anybody who might or might not have acted in the wrong way. We need to reform the board. We need to reform its decision-making. We need to make sure that it's fair, open, and good systems. But the other thing we need to do, because justice delayed is justice denied, is to make sure that decisions are made in good time and a file that is lying around waiting to be dealt with interminably while people have to put their lives on hold. So I would hope that out of all of this morass of a mess, that at last we have brought the board Pleanála issue to a head, and that we will get a much more effective and transparent system out of the changes that are now going to be brought in. Good morning.